They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I say it's best served with a side of irony and a generous helping of poetic justice. My name is Richard Thornwood, and this is the story of how my own son tried to destroy me, and how I made him regret every single moment of his treachery. I'm 78 years old now, but my mind is as sharp as it was when I built my empire from nothing. Thornwood Industries wasn't handed to me on a silver platter. I clawed my way up from the bottom, working 18-hour days, risking everything, sacrificing my youth and, if I'm honest, my first marriage. But I built something magnificent. A billion-dollar enterprise that employed thousands and changed entire industries. My son, Marcus, never understood that. How could he? He was born with everything I never had. Private schools, luxury cars, trust funds that could sustain 10 families for generations. I gave him the world, and somehow, that made him believe he deserved even more. The day I discovered his betrayal started like any other Tuesday. I was in my study at the estate, reviewing quarterly reports, when my assistant Sarah knocked on the door. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she held an envelope. "Mr. Thornwood," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think you need to see this." Inside the envelope were documents. Legal papers. Psychiatric evaluations with my forged signature. Medical reports claiming I was suffering from severe dementia, that I was no longer competent to manage my own affairs. And there, at the bottom of a petition for emergency conservatorship, was Marcus's signature, along with his lawyer's. My own son was trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could seize control of everything I'd built. I sat there for a long moment, staring at those papers. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. Instead, I felt something cold and crystalline forming in my chest. Clarity. Purpose. "Sarah," I said calmly, "cancel all my appointments for the next 2 weeks. And get me Thomas Bennett on the phone." Thomas Bennett was the best investigator money could buy, a former FBI agent who now worked exclusively for clients who could afford his astronomical fees. If there was dirt to be found on Marcus, Thomas would find it. "Mr. Thornwood," Thomas said when we met the next day in a secure location. "Are you sure you want me to investigate your own son?" "My son," I replied, "is trying to steal everything I built and lock me away in some facility where I'll drool into my oatmeal until I die." "Yes, Thomas. I'm very sure." What Thomas uncovered over the next 10 days was worse than I'd imagined. Marcus hadn't just been planning to take control of my fortune. He'd been systematically embezzling from Thornwood Industries for the past 3 years, siphoning money through shell corporations and offshore accounts. He'd been bribing board members, forging documents, and positioning himself to take over the company completely. But that wasn't all. Marcus had been telling people I was senile, spreading rumors at country clubs and charity galas. He'd been slowly isolating me, turning old friends against me with carefully crafted lies about my declining mental state. He'd even convinced my personal physician, Dr. Harrison, to write false reports about my cognitive decline in exchange for a substantial payment. My son had been planning this for years. The conservatorship was just the final move in a long game of chess where I was supposed to be nothing more than a helpless pawn. I could have destroyed him immediately. I had enough evidence to send him to prison for decades. But prison would have been too easy, too quick. Marcus needed to understand what he'd tried to do. He needed to feel the weight of his betrayal, to experience the same helplessness and desperation he'd planned for me. So I began to plan my revenge. The first step was simple. I had to appear to be exactly what Marcus wanted everyone to believe I was. A confused, declining old man losing his grip on reality. It went against every instinct I had, every ounce of pride, but it was necessary. I started making small mistakes in public. Forgetting names at board meetings. Repeating myself during conversations. Once, at a company dinner, I deliberately confused the CFO with someone who'd retired 5 years ago. I could see the satisfaction in Marcus's eyes every time I stumbled, every time I seemed to lose my train of thought. Dad's really going downhill. I heard him tell one of the board members in a staged whisper meant for me to overhear. It's sad to see. I just hope we can act before he makes any decisions that could hurt the company. Meanwhile, in secret, I was working harder than I had in decades. Thomas and I built an ironclad case against Marcus. We documented every illegal transfer, every forged signature, every bribe. We identified every board member who'd been compromised and every business partner who'd been deceived. But I needed more than evidence. I needed to show Marcus exactly how it felt to have everything ripped away. I called a family dinner. Marcus came with his wife, Veronica, a social climbing ice queen who never liked me and didn't bother to hide it. My granddaughter, Sophie, was there too. At 22, she was the only one in the family who'd inherited my work ethic and genuine kindness. She visited me regularly, not for money or favors, but because she actually cared. Marcus, I said during dinner, my voice wavering just slightly, playing my role perfectly. I've been thinking. You're right. I'm getting old, making mistakes. Maybe it's time I stepped back. His eyes lit up like a predator spotting wounded prey. Dad, are you sure? I mean, if that's what you think is best. I want to hand over control of the company. To you. I'm going to sign everything over. Tomorrow. Veronica actually gasped. Marcus tried to hide his grin but failed miserably. Dad, that's a big decision. Are you sure you've thought this through? I'm sure, I said, letting my hand tremble as I reached for my wine glass. But I want a proper ceremony. Invite the board, the senior executives, the press. I want to do this right. Make it official. Of course, Dad, Marcus said, reaching over to pat my hand with all the warmth of a snake. Whatever you want. Sophie was watching me carefully. She was smart, that girl. She knew something was off, but she trusted me enough not to question it in front of the others. The next week was a flurry of activity. Marcus arranged everything with unseemly haste, terrified I might change my mind. The event was scheduled for the Thornwood Industries headquarters, in the grand conference room where I'd announced so many triumphs over the years. The morning of the transfer, I dressed carefully in my best suit. I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled. Today, Marcus would learn the most important lesson of his life. The conference room was packed. Board members, executives, journalists, even some city officials Marcus had invited to witness his ascension. Marcus stood at the front, practically vibrating with anticipation. The papers were laid out on the table, everything ready for my signature. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, his voice smooth and practiced. Thank you all for coming today. As you know, my father, Richard Thornwood, has decided it's time to step back and enjoy his retirement. It's been an honor to work alongside him, and I'm humbled that he's chosen to entrust me with the legacy he's built. Humble. The word tasted like poison coming from his mouth. Dad? Marcus turned to me, gesturing toward the papers. Whenever you're ready. I walked slowly to the table, picked up the pen, and then I stopped. I looked up at the assembled crowd, at the cameras recording this moment, at Marcus's eager face. Before I sign, I said, my voice suddenly strong and clear, with none of the weakness I'd been feigning. I'd like to say a few words. Marcus's smile flickered. Dad, maybe we should. I'd like to tell you all a story. I continued, ignoring him. About trust. About family. About what happens when ambition becomes poison. Dad, please. Marcus's voice had taken on a desperate edge. 3 weeks ago, I said, my voice carrying across the room, I discovered that my son had been embezzling millions of dollars from Thornwood Industries. That he'd been bribing board members, forging documents, and planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could seize control of everything I'd built. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Marcus's face went from red to white in seconds. That's insane! Marcus shouted. He doesn't know what he's saying. This is exactly why we need to. I know exactly what I'm saying. I cut him off. Thomas, if you would? Thomas Bennett stepped forward with a briefcase full of documents. "Everything's documented," he announced. 3 years of systematic theft, fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence has been turned over to the district attorney's office. There's also a detailed report of the false psychiatric evaluations and medical reports that were created to support the conservatorship petition. "You're lying!" Veronica shrieked. "Marcus would never." "Mrs. Thornwood," Thomas said calmly, handing her a document. "You might want to see this. It's a record of the offshore account in your name where much of the stolen money was deposited. You've been an accessory to your husband's crimes." The room exploded into chaos. Security had to restrain Marcus as he lunged toward me, his mask of civility completely shattered. "You senile old bastard! That money was mine! I've earned it dealing with you all these years! I deserved it!" "You deserved nothing," I said coldly. "You were given everything and still wanted more. You were willing to lock me away, to steal from thousands of employees, to destroy the company that gave you your privileged life. And for what? Money you were already going to inherit? Power you weren't capable of wielding?" 2 police officers were moving through the crowd now, making their way toward Marcus. "I'm your son!" Marcus screamed as they reached him. "How can you do this to your own son?" I looked at him for a long moment, this stranger wearing my son's face. "You stopped being my son the moment you decided I was nothing more than an obstacle to your greed." As they led Marcus and Veronica away in handcuffs, the room slowly quieted. Reporters were still filming, board members were whispering frantically, but I stood there calmly, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "As for the leadership of Thornwood Industries," I announced, "I will be resuming my full duties as CEO, effective immediately. And I'm promoting Sophie Thornwood to Vice President of Operations. She's earned it through actual work, not through betrayal and theft." Sophie, who'd been standing in the corner watching everything unfold with wide eyes, looked shocked. "Grandpa, I don't know what to say." "So you'll help me rebuild what your father tried to destroy," I said, reaching out to her. "So you'll help me make sure this company continues to be something we can be proud of." She crossed the room and hugged me tightly. "I will," she whispered. "I promise." The aftermath was brutal but necessary. Marcus was charged with embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and a dozen other crimes. The trial was sensational, covered by every major news outlet. The evidence was overwhelming, and he was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Veronica, as an accessory, received 7 years. I could have visited him in prison. Part of me wanted to, if only to see if there was any remorse, any understanding of what he'd done. But Sophie convinced me otherwise. "He needs to face what he's done on his own," she said. "Your presence would only give him someone else to blame." She was right, of course. She usually was. The board members who'd accepted bribes were removed. Dr. Harrison lost his medical license. I restructured the entire executive leadership, promoting people based on merit and integrity rather than politics and connections. It was painful, cutting out the rot that had infected my company, but it was necessary. Thornwood Industries thrived. Under my renewed leadership and Sophie's fresh perspective, we launched new initiatives, entered new markets, and saw profits soar beyond even my most optimistic projections. It turned out that removing corruption and rewarding actual competence was good for business. Who knew? Sophie transformed from a promising young woman into a formidable executive. She had my strategic mind but her grandmother's compassion. She understood that a company wasn't just about profits but about the people who worked there, the communities we served, the legacy we'd leave behind. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, I was in my study when Sophie came to see me. She looked nervous, which was unusual for her. "Grandpa," she said, sitting down across from me, "Marcus has been writing to me from prison." I felt my jaw tighten. "Has he?" "He wants to see me. He says he's changed, that he's had time to think about what he did. He wants to apologize." "Do you believe him?" I asked. Sophie was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. But I think I need to find out. He's still my father, even after everything. I understood. Family was complicated, even when it was poisoned by betrayal. If you go, I want you to be careful. People like Marcus, they're very good at manipulation. He might have learned to be even better at it. I know, she said. But I need to do this for myself, not for him. She visited Marcus the following week. When she came back, she looked older somehow, sadder but also wiser. He apologized, she told me over dinner. He cried. He said he'd been consumed by jealousy and greed, that he'd spent his whole life feeling like he'd never measure up to you, and it drove him to do terrible things. Do you think he meant it? I asked. Sophie considered the question carefully. I think he meant some of it. But I also think he's angry that his plan failed, angry that he's in prison while we're running the company he thought would be his. The apology felt like it was for himself more than for us. You're wise beyond your years, I said. I learn from the best, she replied with a sad smile. But Grandpa, I need to ask you something. Do you regret it? The way you exposed him, the public humiliation, the prison sentence? Do you ever wish you'd handled it differently? I thought about that question for a long time. Did I regret destroying my son's life? Did I regret the public spectacle, the family scandal that would follow our name for generations? No, I finally said. Marcus made his choices. He could have worked honestly, earned his place, been a son I could be proud of. Instead, he chose betrayal and theft. He chose to try to rob me of my dignity, my freedom, my life's work. The consequences he's facing are the direct result of his own actions. If I'd handled it privately, swept it under the rug, paid off the people he'd bribed and forgiven his theft, what message would that send? That there are no consequences for betrayal? That family means you can do whatever you want without accountability? But he's still your son, Sophie said softly. Yes, I agreed. And that makes his betrayal even worse. He knew me better than anyone. He knew what I'd built, what I'd sacrificed, what it all meant. And he still decided to try to destroy me. That's not the action of a son. That's the action of an enemy. The years continued to pass. Thornwood Industries grew stronger. Sophie met a good man, a professor of environmental science who was passionate about sustainability. They got married in a beautiful ceremony at the estate, and I walked her down the aisle with more pride than I'd felt in years. Marcus was released from prison after serving 12 years with good behavior. I heard through various channels that he'd left the country, moved to South America somewhere, living under a different name. He never tried to contact me, and I never tried to contact him. Whatever relationship we'd once had was dead, killed by his own hand. One evening, 5 years after Marcus's release, I was sitting on the terrace of my estate, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sophie came to join me, her 8-month pregnant belly making the chair somewhat challenging to navigate. Grandpa, she said once she was settled, I've been thinking about names for the baby. Oh? I said, smiling. And what have you decided? If it's a boy, she said carefully, I want to name him Richard. After you? I felt my throat tighten with emotion. Sophie, you don't have to. I want to, she interrupted. You've shown me what it means to build something meaningful, to have integrity, to stand up for what's right even when it's painful. You've been more of a father to me than my own father ever was. I want my son to carry your name and hopefully some of your strength. I reached over and took her hand. It would be my honor. And Grandpa? She added. I want to tell you something else. When Marcus writes to me, yes, he still does occasionally, he always asks about the company. About profits, about expansions, about market share. He never asks about you. He never asks how you're doing, whether you're healthy, whether you're happy. He only cares about the empire he lost. That's who he is, I said. That's who he's always been, I just didn't want to see it. But you know what I think? Sophie said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I think the best revenge you ever got wasn't exposing him or sending him to prison. The best revenge is that you're happy. You're successful. You're surrounded by people who genuinely love you. You built something that will last for generations, not because you hoarded it jealously, but because you were willing to share it with someone who deserved it. That's the real victory. I sat there, looking at my granddaughter, at the sunset, at the estate that had witnessed so much triumph and tragedy. She was right. Marcus had tried to take everything from me, but in the end, he'd only taken himself out of the picture. The company thrived. My legacy was secure. And I was surrounded by love and respect, not fear and manipulation. You know, I said, when I first discovered what Marcus was doing, I wanted to destroy him. I wanted him to suffer the way he planned to make me suffer. And I did destroy him in a way. But somewhere along the line, revenge stopped being about hurting him and became about protecting everything I'd built, everyone who depended on me. It became about showing that actions have consequences, that betrayal isn't just swept under the rug because of a family name. Do you think he understands that now? Sophie asked. I don't know, I admitted. And honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. Marcus's understanding or lack thereof doesn't affect my life. I made my peace with who he is and who he'll never be. The only person's opinion that mattered was my own, and I can look at myself in the mirror every morning knowing I did the right thing. Sophie smiled and leaned her head against my shoulder. I hope I can be half the person you are, Grandpa. You already are, I assured her. You're everything I hoped Marcus would be and everything I'm grateful he wasn't. Because if he'd been a better person, I might never have realized how much more you had to offer. 3 months later, little Richard Thornwood was born. I held him in my arms in the hospital, this tiny new life carrying my name and my hopes for the future. He had Sophie's eyes and his father's nose, and he gripped my finger with surprising strength. Hello, Richard, I whispered to him. You've got quite a legacy to live up to, but don't worry. Your mother will teach you that it's not about the money or the power. It's about integrity, compassion, and standing up for what's right. And if you're lucky, you'll never have to learn the hard lessons about betrayal that I did. Now, sitting here at 83 years old, I look back on those turbulent years with a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. Marcus made his choices, and I made mine. I chose to protect what I'd built, to stand up for justice even when it meant destroying my own son's life. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the right thing. People often ask me if I regret how things turned out, if I wish I'd been more forgiving, more merciful. My answer is always the same: mercy without accountability isn't mercy at all. It's enabling. Marcus needed to face the consequences of his actions, not just for my sake, but for his own. Whether he ever learns from them is up to him. Thornwood Industries is now preparing for a new transition. In 2 years, on my 85th birthday, I'll officially retire and Sophie will take over as CEO. I have no doubt she'll lead the company to heights even I couldn't imagine. She's already implemented sustainable practices, expanded into green technology, and created a corporate culture based on respect and innovation rather than fear and cutthroat competition. Little Richard is now 5 years old, bright and curious and kind. Sometimes I see glimpses of the man he'll become, and I'm filled with hope. He asks me questions about the company, about business, about life. And I answer them honestly, teaching him that success isn't measured just in dollars but in the lives you improve, the integrity you maintain, and the legacy you leave behind. As for Marcus, I heard recently that he's living in Argentina, running a small consulting business under an assumed name. I don't wish him ill. I simply wish him nothing at all. He's a closed chapter in my life, a painful lesson about the dangers of entitlement and greed. The greatest revenge, I've learned, isn't destroying your enemy. It's building something so magnificent, so enduring, that your enemy's betrayal becomes nothing more than a footnote in a much larger story. Marcus tried to write the ending of my tale, but instead, he wrote himself out of it entirely. I still work most days, not because I have to, but because I want to. The company is my legacy, my life's work, and I'm not ready to let it go completely. Sophie often joins me in my study, and we'll discuss strategy, review reports, plan for the future. Those are some of my favorite moments, when I can see the torch being passed to someone worthy of carrying it. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, I wonder what would have happened if I'd never discovered Marcus's betrayal. Would he have succeeded? Would I be locked away somewhere, drugged and forgotten, while he squandered everything I'd built? The thought sends a chill down my spine. But I did discover it. I fought back. I won. And more importantly, I ensured that the company I'd spent my life building would continue to thrive in the hands of someone who understood its true value. That's the real revenge. Not the courtroom drama or the prison sentence. Not the public humiliation or the shattered reputation. The real revenge is that I'm still here, still strong, still relevant. I'm surrounded by people who love me for who I am, not what I can give them. I've built a legacy that will outlast me by generations. And I've shown that betrayal, even from your own blood, doesn't have to be the end of your story. Marcus tried to write my ending. Instead, I'm writing my grandson's beginning. And that, in the end, is the sweetest revenge of all. Last month, on what would have been Marcus's 60th birthday, I received an unexpected letter. It was from him, postmarked from Buenos Aires. I almost threw it away without reading it, but something made me open it. The letter was brief. He didn't ask for forgiveness or offer excuses. He simply wrote, "I understand now what I threw away. Not the money or the company, but the chance to be someone you could be proud of. I hope Sophie is everything I wasn't. Give little Richard my best, even though he'll never know me. You were right to do what you did. I deserved every consequence. For what it's worth, I'm sorry." I read the letter 3 times, looking for manipulation, for hidden agendas, for any sign that this was just another scheme. But it seemed genuine, a moment of clarity from a man who'd finally understood the magnitude of his mistakes. I didn't respond to the letter. What would I say? Some betrayals are too deep for simple forgiveness. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. But I kept the letter, filed it away in my desk. Perhaps someday, when Richard is old enough to understand, I'll show it to him. A cautionary tale about what happens when ambition consumes character, when greed destroys integrity. Yesterday, Sophie brought little Richard to the office. He'd been learning about business in school and wanted to see where Great-Grandpa worked. I gave him a tour, showing him the boardroom where I'd exposed his biological grandfather's betrayal, the office where I'd built an empire, the walls lined with achievements and accolades. "Great-Grandpa," he asked, his small hand in mine, "why is there a picture of you but not my other grandpa?" It was the question I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Sophie started to intervene, but I held up my hand. "Your other grandfather," I said carefully, kneeling down to his level, "made some very bad choices. He tried to take things that didn't belong to him, and he hurt people in the process. Sometimes, even people we love can disappoint us. But that doesn't mean we stop trying to do the right thing ourselves." "Is he in timeout?" Richard asked with the innocent logic of a 5-year-old. "Something like that," I said, smiling despite myself. "A very long time out." "When I grow up," Richard declared with the confidence of youth, "I'm going to make good choices so you can be proud of me." I pulled him into a hug, this precious child who carried my name and my hopes. "You already make me proud, Richard. Every single day." As I walked them out of the building, waving goodbye as they drove away, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The cycle of betrayal and revenge was over. What remained was redemption, legacy, and the promise of a future built on integrity rather than greed. Marcus had tried to take everything from me. In the end, he'd given me something far more valuable: clarity about what truly mattered. Not the money, not the power, not even the company itself. What mattered was passing on values worth having, teaching the next generation that character was more important than wealth, that integrity trumped ambition, that family meant something deeper than bloodlines. I walk back into Thornwood Industries, through the lobby where my portrait hangs alongside Sophie's and space has been left for little Richard's someday. This building, this company, this legacy, it nearly fell to someone who would have destroyed it all. But it survived. It thrived. It evolved. And that's my revenge. Not destruction, but creation. Not tearing down, but building up. Not dwelling on betrayal, but celebrating triumph. Marcus is a ghost, a shadow, a cautionary tale. But I'm still here, still building, still teaching, still loving. The sun sets on another day at Thornwood Industries. Tomorrow, there will be new challenges, new opportunities, new stories to write. But tonight I sit in my study, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and a revenge well executed. They say living well is the best revenge. I say living with integrity, loving with authenticity, and leaving a legacy worth remembering, that's the ultimate revenge. Marcus tried to end my story. Instead, he became a minor character in a much greater tale, one that will be told long after both of us are gone. And you know what? I wouldn't change a single moment of it. Not the betrayal, not the heartbreak, not the painful decision to expose my own son. Because all of it led to this, a company stronger than ever, a granddaughter who's everything I hoped Marcus would be, a great-grandson carrying my name and hopefully my values, and the knowledge that I stood up for what was right, even when it cost me everything I thought mattered. That's not just revenge. That's justice. That's integrity. That's legacy. And that's how Richard Thornwood, millionaire grandfather, won the war against betrayal and wrote an ending worth remembering. The best stories don't end with the villain's defeat. They end with the hero's triumph. And I'm still here, still standing, still building, still winning. That's my revenge. And it tastes sweeter than anything Marcus could ever have imagined.